Some of the most common themes mentioned by ET contactees are massive Earth changes, huge earthquakes, mega tsunamis, rising sea levels, a comet impact, and a pole shift. The ETs frequently talked to Frank about the coming Earth changes, who often joked that to take advantage of the future Earth changes, everyone should invest in soon-to-be oceanfront property in California and Arizona. One time, aboard an ET ship, the Nordics took Frank to a monitor to see what the U.S. Southwest would look like after the Earth changes. From a high altitude, Frank saw that New Mexico, Arizona, and the southern half of California were much wetter than today. The region appeared more like the modern-day Midwest of the United States with lots of green leafy trees, rather than pine trees. The semi-deserts were gone, replaced by hundreds of new perennial streams and rivers. The entire region was wetter and seemingly cooler. He could not tell how far in the future it was. Was it 20 years? Or 200 years? He asked, but the ETs would only say, time is not linear. They rarely answered Frank's questions about timing. Then, Frank asked, how does that area get that much wetter? As he asked, the computer monitors zoomed in to show the southern coast of California near Los Angeles. The Pacific Ocean was miles farther inland than today. Large parts of downtown Los Angeles were underwater. The tops of dozens of crumbling skyscrapers stuck above the new ocean level. Cities farther inland were unaffected by the new sea level, but still, something had destroyed nearly all of the buildings and freeways. They all had turned into rubble. Puzzled, Frank asked what caused this. The ETs said, realignments. Frank wasn't sure what that meant. Was it from the San Andreas fault line? Or a pole shift? He asked, but the ETs wouldn't say. Frank had been in San Francisco many times, and so, he mentally wondered how that area would look. The moment he thought about the city, the scene shifted to show a close-up. He was amazed. The ship was reading his mind. Whenever he mentally thought of a specific city, the area would pop up on the computer-like monitor. As the scene zoomed in, Frank was surprised to see that parts of San Francisco were underwater. San Francisco Bay now extended miles farther south. East of San Francisco, the Pacific Ocean spilled through the mountains to fill much of the central basin of California. He was astounded to see that fertile fields and orchards, some of the nation's most productive croplands, now lay beneath an inland sea that extended nearly half the length of California, from near the Oregon border to the mountains north of Los Angeles. Stunned by what he was witnessing, he asked, did the earth go down or the oceans go up? The answer came back, the waters rose. He thought, oh my God. What happened? A surprising answer came back, there is no longer any ice at your Earth's poles. Frank was dumbfounded. If all the polar ice melted and the oceans rose, that would explain everything he saw. Here is John's story. One night, he went out of his body onto an ET ship high above Virginia. John had long been curious about Frank's description of the flooding in California, but the ETs had not provided Frank with much information. Now John was hoping for more. Suddenly, the ship moved out high over an ocean. In the distance, he recognized the southern tip of Greenland, so he knew he was looking north over the Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles away from Virginia. There was no feeling of acceleration or motion. John was just over Virginia one moment and over the Atlantic the next. As John looked through the large viewing window of the ship, he was astonished. He had seen many photos of the Greenland ice sheet, but now, the vast white ice sheet was gone. Instead, a huge landlocked inland sea extended about half the length of Greenland. Then the ship moved instantly again. As before, John saw mostly the ocean, but this time, he recognized the tip of South America in the distance and understood that he was over Antarctica. There was no ice there either. Instead, about half the continent was now open ocean. Most of Antarctica was now under the waters of the Southern Ocean, leaving dozens of small isolated islands and several large ones. John struggled to come to terms with the missing ice. There was none in Greenland or Antarctica, and none on the Andes of South America in the distance. Earth was now ice-free for the first time in millions of years. And all that melted water was now in the world's oceans. In another out-of-body experience, John was taken up into an ET ship and shown a future scene on a large monitor. He was high above Earth and could see the Baja Peninsula and the California coastline below him. The Pacific Ocean off to the left. As was often the case, the scene was in 3D, so that it seemed like he was looking out a wide window, but he knew it to be a computer reconstruction. To John's surprise, he suddenly saw a massive wave rise from the Pacific and wash inland into California. It was thousands of feet deep and several hundred miles wide, extending from San Diego to Santa Barbara. As it came ashore, it changed color from ocean blue to frothy dirty gray, and flattened into a tongue-like shape. The enormous wave continued inland, flooding across Southern California and the southern halves of Arizona and New Mexico. It finally stopped when it reached western Texas and then slowly began to withdraw into the Pacific. John felt certain that any tsunamis could not cross mountains in California and Arizona that were many thousands of feet tall. So, he asked the ET standing next to him, "Is that real or symbolic?" The ET responded, "Use your intuition." John thought for a moment and said, "Well, I don't see how a real tsunami could travel that far or reach that high. It must be symbolic." He decided to interpret it as a dream. "Okay, if it's symbolic, I would say that it represents the future when a huge tsunami hits California from the west. It won't wash entirely across Arizona and New Mexico, but it will be very powerful. Far more than a typical tsunami." And ET told him that he was correct. Later, to check on what John saw, the authors did an online search. Sometimes, enormous chunks of the underwater flanks of the Hawaiian Islands break off and slide into the Pacific Ocean. When such giant landslides occur, they create enormous waves called megatsunamis. One was more than 300 meters when it hit the island of Hawaii long ago. It continued east, and when it hit California, it was still 90 meters high. The tallest known tsunami wave was 525 meters in Alaska. Even though huge, none of those waves would have washed across California into New Mexico. So, what the ET showed John appeared to be symbolic. The ETs explained to him that many scenes shown to contactees are not literal but symbolic. They stress that it is essential for a contactee to use intuition to tell the difference.